The GDA is weak. I was weak. But I am not weak. I will have my vengeance, starting with you!
Hello Internet, and welcome to another TDX Game Theory. And I'm finally gonna discuss everything you need to know about the lore of the Christmas 2024 event. I waited for both parts of the event to release before making this video to get a full grasp of the story. This video will be divided into 11 parts, which range from the factions, Christmas Part 1, Christmas Part 2, Avenge Him, General Salgar, Frosty's Fate, Revenant and the Soul, the Toy Factory, the puppet on strings, the music, and the end. Okay, for one last time, let's discuss all the current factions in TDX. We have the GDA, Dr. Xenon's army, Calamity, the Awakened, the Relics, the Yellow Symbol, Void's army, and lastly, Frosty's army. So, that makes up a total of 8 factions, and that's a massive number. Now, let's move on to the actual event itself. In the first part of the Christmas event, we play on the map Arctic Research Base, which is one of the various GDA bases scattered across the region. On the map, we can see a lot of things like John's plushie with a Christmas hat, which is obviously an Easter egg, a huge broken satellite, turrets mounted on top of the GDA Research Base, and most importantly, a broken down portal which can either be used for teleportation or for transporting the enemies to fight us. Some similar portals can be found in the maps Outpost Forge, Singularity, Scorched Passage, and a huge portal in the Factorium. At the start, we are first introduced to Dr. Xenon, who taps into our communication system and mentions how she was surprised to see us win against the Awakened army, and that since our army was drained from that fight, she decides to send out a scout force to take over this GDA base in particular. If you somehow don't know who Dr. Xenon is, she first appeared in the 2023 Christmas event and is the main antagonist of TDX, where she created all the Eradicators and left the GDA due to a falling out. She's also known for sacrificing her companion Dr. Mallory to the Calamity. Just watch my previous theories to know more about her background if you didn't know already. Some notable things to see in Dr. Xenon's base is an Eradicator Mark I head, which could be a prototype or a spare head, just like how she had spare Exo Santas. We can also see a jet with her X logo marked on it, which could possibly mean that she uses a jet to transport her forces, or she uses it to drop avatars from the sky, or maybe it'll be used as a future flying enemy, but who knows. The last important thing we can see in her base is this figure of a golden predator. This can mean many things. First, this could be another prototype or another variation of the predator enemy, just like how we have the regular and snow versions. Second, this could be an entirely new boss, possibly for nightmare mode. Or third, this could just be a statue or a trophy, since she mentions how she quote-unquote loves her predators. Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing to say. In the normal difficulty of Christmas Part 1, our narrator is the advisor, and he mentions how Dr. Xenon is invading this Arctic research base after many years to steal our crystals. Now, we know that various different kinds of crystals exist in the world, like the Calamity Crystals which power the golden towers that Dr. Xenon created. These Calamity Crystals are also being extracted upon to power the various enemies of TDX through the power straps. We also know that Void's crystal does exist, which I theorized in my previous video that it powered the Awakened Army. The rest of Advisor's dialogue is just him talking about how to counter the various enemies, and that he sees more of our allies become resurrected, which are the Cryo Blasters and Cryo Rangers. One last important part of his dialogue is when he mentions, Intel reports the crystals can be used against Calamity's forces, and that Dr. Xenon wants her hands on these for some reason. I'll get back to this later. In the Nightmare version of Christmas Part 1, the narrator is Dr. Xenon herself. She mentioned how she was surprised that the GDA had not disposed of us yet, and talked about how the advisor was different from her experience. This leads me to think that the GDA has been doing some suspicious stuff in the background, and has not told us anything about it yet. While we don't know Advisor's true intentions, we can only assume that he is the traitor that was talked about in the defeat theme of the Halloween event. She also talks about how converting our Cryo Ranger was easy because she was the most naive of them all, and talks about how she spread her predators all across the region. She then talks about her spare Exosantas, and lastly, her latest invention, which is Ginger Dread. The most important thing that Dr. Xenon tells us is how she had files destroyed from the GDA HQ, and that one of the files that slipped by had information about the crystals. Going back to what Advisor said, he said that these crystals that Dr. Xenon wants can be used against Calamity's forces. Now, I have some theories on why Dr. Xenon wants these crystals. My first thought would be that ever since she summoned Calamity, it backfired and Calamity's forces went to fight against her army, which was clearly not the plan. So, using these crystals, she can finally control Calamity's forces to do what she wants. My second thought is that she wants these anti-Calamity crystals to prevent the Awakened from stealing any of her future inventions, just like how they stole the Corrupted Predators, Corrupted Apex Predator, and Corrupted Mark II. After thinking for a while, I think that the most likely reason why she wants these crystals is to save Dr. Mallory from Calamity's control. In the same lore drop I showed earlier, one of the sticky notes says rescue her, meaning that Dr. Xenon regrets sacrificing Dr. Mallory and is trying to free her from Calamity's control and turn her back to human from her demon form. That makes the most logical sense to me, but now, let's move on to the second part of the Christmas event. In the second part of the Christmas event, we play on the map Fortress Snowlin. On the map, we can see a massive GDA base which holds the power crystals. We can also see this power line of electricity that flows through this pipe, which could also be powered by the crystal energy. We are then put into a cutscene with Dr. Xenon again, and she talks about how she revived General Salgar, and that Advisor didn't want her to revive Salgar, probably because he saw him as a huge threat to the GDA. She then breaks down and talks about him, which I'll get back to this mysterious character later on.
I could have saved him, you know.
In the normal version of Christmas Part 2, our narrator is the advisor and he doesn't talk about anything interesting and just gives tips about how to counter the enemies. We also get to see many new enemies from Frosty's army, although none of them appear to be any of Frosty's old allies. One major thing to point out is that two of the enemies, which are the Frozen Gladiator and the Snow Wendigo, are also part of Revenant's army that appeared in the Tower Battles 2022 winter event. I'll get back to this huge detail later on. In the Nightmare version of Christmas Part 2, this is where the lore really kicks in. Dr. Xenon is our narrator, and she tells us that Frosty's army wasn't killed, and that they hid in the Arctic region after Frosty died. She also talks about how she worked with Frosty in the past, just like how she worked with Void in the past, and tried to find a weakness in the GDA. Who knows which other Tower Battles bosses she has worked with before. Anyways, she then talks about how General Salgar seeks vengeance, and how she put the blame on us so that he and the rest of Frosty's army would attack us. Salgar also says that Frosty is alive, but I'll get back to that later. She then talks about her new Snow Apex Predator, which means that the Apex Predator enemy could also be mass-produced. She talks about how she was the one who designed Fortress Snowlin since she worked for the GDA in the past. And lastly, she talks about avenging the mystery character that I talked about earlier. Now, let's talk about who this character actually is. Okay, so who is this mysterious character that Dr. Xenon wants to avenge? Well, let's talk about our possible candidates who I think that are not this character. First, it's not Frosty, as she has no care for him, as she said that he doesn't matter to her. It's not General Salgar, because I mean, he is alive after all, and it's just a random servant of Frosty, and it's obviously not Dr. Mallory, because him refers to a male character. Now, this leaves me with the advisor, because she mentions his name and then follows up about saving him. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would she save or avenge Advisor? He is clearly alive and Advisor is her enemy. Well, I think that she is talking about Advisor, but the original Advisor. In my previous theory video, I theorized that the commander narrator is the same person as the Advisor due to many reasons, like Advisor knowing about the past enemies, or both of them having the same poses. Now thinking about it, I think that both of them are actually entirely different people due to the skin color being different and other reasons that I'll discuss. To not get confused with the name Commander, as our character is also called the Commander, let's call Commander Flynn, and Advisor will just be called Advisor. I think that Flynn was the original Advisor that Dr. Xenon is talking about, but was then replaced by the Advisor after he did something to Flynn. And that thing that Advisor did was that he killed Flynn so that he would take his place as the new Advisor. Some evidence to this is that we know that in TDX, some skins are canon to the lore, like the Eradicator Juggernaut and Eradicator John skins. Now, are there any skins in tower battles pertaining to Flynn's death? Well, wouldn't you know it, but there is a statue skin for Commander in tower battles as a monument to him as if he died. And yes, his name is actually Flynn. And that is my first theory about the mysterious character. For my second theory, I discussed again in my previous video that this Advisor may be a clone of the real Advisor. This leads me to think that Dr. Xenon knows that the real Advisor is dead, while the clone acts as him in disguise. Now, looking back at what I have said, I'm not really sure if this him character is actually the Advisor, or anyone else for that matter, but this person may be an entirely new character that we don't know of yet, and will probably be introduced to us later on in the TDX story. After all, I don't really have much evidence to work with, but that's why it's all a theory after all. The final boss that we are introduced to is General Salgar, and we don't know much about him, and that we only know that he is a loyal servant to Frosty that has been looking for him for years. Now, I believe that General Salgar is a powerful and more evolved version of the Titan enemy. If you don't know who Titan is, he is one of the enemies that fought alongside Frosty, acting as his guardian during the 2019 Tower Battles Winter event. Now, let me explain why I think that Titan is General Salgar. First, he has very similar visual appearances, but the most notable part of his design is that he has the same looking helmet as the Titan enemy, which is a dark blue helmet with spikes/horns and the crest on top. Though, there is a chance that this is Frosty's helmet that he's wearing, as he does throw it away when he reaches phase 2. Second, Salgar has an attack where it rains snowballs on the towers, just like how the Titan can throw a snowball at a tower. Third, we know that enemies like the Wendigo can evolve, just like how it turned into the Elder Wendigo, meaning that Titan possibly could have turned into its evolved form, which is General Salgar. Lastly, if we look at the badges, it literally says, "Bring Frosty's Titan down." So, I'm fairly certain that General Salgar is the same enemy as the Titan. What confuses me is that the whole event is known as Frosty's Invasion, and I was quite shocked to see that he didn't even appear revived in the event. I mean, he was even in the teaser image alongside General Salgar. But time and time again, we are told that Frosty is dead and gone for good. But, is he really dead? Well, based on Dr. Xenon's dialogue, General Salgar said he thinks that Frosty is still alive. Now, if Frosty was dead, then why would Salgar push into trying to find him for many years? Maybe it's because that he and Frosty have a connection between the two. If we look at the Tower Battles Christmas menu from 2020, we can see Frosty's body just laying there, but we can also see that his crystal power source is still active and is emitting an aura, as if he is still alive, but needs time to regenerate. Does this mean that Frosty is alive? Well, that's debatable to say at least, but I think that there's a 50% chance that he's still out there somewhere. Okay, so there was this huge theory that after Frosty died, his soul still lived on like a vengeful spirit. Frosty's soul then went on to embody the Revenant enemy during the 2022 Tower Battles Winter event. This is supported by both bosses having similar appearances, like having black horns, black cuffs, and a cape. The name Revenant also means a dead person who has returned after a long absence. And then, when Revenant died, Frosty's soul left his body to find a new host, and that was the big theory that was never confirmed. That was until we saw the Snow Wendigo and Frozen Gladiator, who are a part of Frosty's army, but are also a part of Revenant's army. So, could this theory actually be true, and that Frosty is a soul trying to find his new host? Well, if it is true due to all the evidence, my next theory is that Frosty has already found the next soul to possess, and that person is General Salgar. Now, I know what you're thinking, Rogue, there's no way that Frosty's soul is inside Salgar. Well, let me explain. After Frosty's soul was weakened after Revenant was defeated, he needed a place to stay dormant, and he chose General Salgar, having no control over him due to Frosty's soul needing to regenerate. Now, I think that General Salgar exhibits Frosty's soul, but has no idea that they were connected this whole time. Let's look at all of Salgar's similarities to the two winter bosses. For Frosty, they both have the same helmet, the same axe/mace weapon, and blue spikes. For Revenant on the other hand, they both have a ruff, which is the fluffy thing that you see on their necks, they both have one broken horn, and an exposed rib cage. This means that after Frosty's soul stayed dormant in General Salgar, Salgar also had most of Frosty's and Revenant's visual appearances combined. A big piece of evidence that I have on why Frosty's soul is in General Salgar is his theme song, which is Vigamadir, and I want you to listen to these lyrics closely. Now, this whole line of lyrics has an important detail when it mentions, "Through the valleys frost will creep, dreams of warmth will fall asleep, sparkling ice his frozen art, winter's grasp in every heart." The first line means how Frosty keeps creeping on or switching hosts, just like how he possessed Revenant and Salgar. The second line talks about his soul sleeping or staying dormant in General Salgar. The third and fourth line could mean how Frosty and Salgar are connected through heart, and wouldn't you know it, General Salgar has a heart that beats every now and then. There's another line where it says, "To Master Frosty we are bound." This means that Salgar is bound or tied to Frosty's soul, but "we" means plural, which means that it's both Salgar and Revenant, since Frosty's soul probably also took some of Revenant's conscience, hence why Salgar has both of their appearances combined. Now, the last piece of evidence that I have is going back to what I said earlier in the Tower Battles 2020 Winter menu. Frosty is dead, but his core remains active, and now, when General Salgar dies, his core remains active, and it doesn't stop emitting light, where Frosty's soul lives on to find his next host. In the Battle Pass, there are some pretty unique skins and emotes, but one that caught my eye was the Eradicator toy. We do know that the GDA does have some sort of toy factory in the map Santa's Stronghold, and I find it strange that they are making toys of the Eradicators instead of making toys of the towers. This means that there is more evidence pertaining to the GDA having some contribution to the creation of the Eradicators. As we know, Dr. Xenon has a big red X on top of her head, which normally stands up, but in some images of Dr. Xenon, I see the X logo differently. The X actually looks like a cross brace that you would normally see when someone controls a puppet. Now, I'm not sure if it's just an angle of perspective or if it has any meaning, but the X logo could mean that there is someone we don't know of who is puppeteering Dr. Xenon, like an even bigger antagonist. It's just a thought though. The music used in the event has some lore implications with its lyrics, particularly the song Vigamadir made by the Gijay and Aaron Prevails. The word Vigamadir comes from the old Icelandic dictionary and means a fighting man or a great manslayer. For the song, I'll only be discussing the important lyrics, and with that, I will play the first chunk of the lyrics. When the lyrics talk about "to master Frosty we are bound," I already talked about this, but it means Salgar's or Revenant's connection to Frosty's soul. And Fire and Ice Wage Battle's tune means two opposing sides like the GDA and Frosty's army having a war with each other. Lastly, the line, "in endless nights beneath the moon," means how we are in an endless war with Frosty's army while fighting under the moon. Then, we get to hear a heretic leitmotif for some reason. Now, I will play the second chunk of the lyrics. In the second chunk of lyrics, I already talked about this previously, but sparkling ice his frozen art, winter's grasp in every heart, means how Frosty will live on through his heart, where Salgar does have a frozen heart that beats every now and then. Lastly, the last lines of lyrics basically talk about seeing Frosty as their leader, and then the song ends with Frosty's leitmotif. And with that ends my whole theory on the lore of the Christmas 2024 event, but there's still many unanswered questions, like who is the person that Dr. Xenon wants to avenge? Why does she need the anti-calamity crystals? Or is Frosty really gone for good? Maybe we will get answers to these in the future, but with that, always remember that that's just a theory. A TDX game theory. Thanks for watching.